Welcome to Innovation Essentials. This is Module 3, and we're going to be looking at finding great insights. And really what today is all about is identifying the safest place to begin your innovation from. We're so tempted to begin at the idea phase because that's where the fun happens, in the brainstorming phase. But actually we need to rewind slightly and ensure that we have really understood the problem or the opportunity that we're pursuing. And I want to introduce to you today some tools that aren't that commonly known yet, but help you identify great insights and give you a great starting point for your innovation. So let's recap on where we went with the previous module. We were talking about innovation strategy. And one of the biggest problems that we face is that today the status quo, the business as usual, dominates operations and means that we don't have enough time, energy, resource to create tomorrow and create vulnerabilities for us. Then we looked at some tools to help us break down how we can think about how resource and focus needs to be applied across an organization and splitting those things accordingly. Based on the speed of change in our industry and a few other things. And then finally, we looked at a framework to help us figure out, well, yeah, all very well to break down the resources and the focus into different areas, but what needs to happen beyond that so that we can build an environment where innovation can really show up and work well. So today we are going to be looking at finding great insights. So what are we going to cover today? Well, there are three key areas that I want to cover in this module. The first is working with an idea it's what I call the innovation particle. It's the smallest and safest starting point and unit of bolder innovation. So I'm going to unpack what that means for us. Then we're going to look at an innovation X-ray. So how do you find these hidden insights that most people miss that allow us to start the innovation process from the right place? So I'm going to introduce a tool for you there. And then finally, we're going to bring these two parts together, and I want to show you how you can become more accurate at predicting the future based on what you discover in this innovation X-ray process. So as usual, we'll be following Be Less Zombie, the content from the book. So if you're reading along or if you're thinking about getting the book, chapters 15 to 17 are really the areas that we'll be covering today. But again, I just want to reiterate that you don't need to buy the book to get value from this course. This is just entirely free to help you to make some progress along the way. Okay, so let's get started with the innovation particle. But before we do that, I just want to set some context for where we're going to be going with this particular idea. So when we are thinking about innovation, there is generally a flow that we need to follow if we're going to do it successfully. And what I'm going to show you now is the process that most of the great innovators follow to a greater or lesser extent. So the first is finding opportunities. What are the problems that are worth solving, the opportunities that are worth pursuing that can help us find a relevant place in the future? Once we've identified those opportunities, our ability to ask great questions that then sparks brilliant ideas is a really important process, and we're going to be talking a little bit about idea generation a bit later, more around what's the environment that we need to create around us so that creativity is kind of happening or more automatically. Then we need to select our ideas based on some assessment. Then before we get too carried away, we're going to test those ideas with some experiments. And then as the data shows us that the experiment is working and growing, then we start to scale the idea, and then we'll be looking for business models. Now that's an end-to-end process. That's a very quick, high-level view. Inside the book I go through this in a lot more detail, and there's tools and techniques all the way through here, but that's the flow we're looking at. And there are three broad phases. The first is finding opportunities, and what we're trying to do here is find something the customer really wants us to solve, rather than coming up with a ton of ideas that no one really cares enough about to buy, really, because often that's what it comes down to. So finding opportunities, finding solutions. So once we found a problem to solve, now we're in the right place to try and find a solution that will solve that problem best. And then we're looking for business models that can help us scale into the future. So that's a broad context, and it's just showing you that we're starting right at the beginning. We're not jumping into idea generation, we're starting right back here, which can feel frustrating, but believe me, it's worth it. So let's jump in and look at this idea of the innovation particle. Let me show you a picture, and I want you to just think for a moment about what you can see. So what's happening in this picture? Probably taken in the 1950s, 60s. It's some guys going to work. I can see people reading newspapers, maybe for entertainment. They're relieving boredom, perhaps, educating themselves. That guy on the right, two back, looks like he's hiding. Maybe he's sleeping. Maybe they're practicing wearing hats. Maybe the guy in the middle is looking for his hat. Anyway, you can see there's a bunch of people on a train reading newspapers. What's happening here? Well, pretty much the same thing. They're all making the same kinds of progress. They're entertaining themselves, they're reading, they're distracting themselves from the boredom around them. And it's the same progress, it's just a different era. Okay, hold that thought, and now we're going to move on to another example. So let's just say that I'm this kid here, and actually this is all of us. This is us wanting to manage and access our music anytime, any place. That's the progress. This is the key word that we're going to be looking at. The progress that I want to make in a context is to manage, access and manage my music anytime, any place. If that's the progress, let's look at the ways that I've tried to do that over time. If you go back through the history of the recorded music industry, you'll see that there are a number of technology shifts that radically changed the way that people were able to access and manage their music. And with each shift, with each jump, progress got easier. I was able to make more progress, better progress with each shift. But the progress hasn't changed. So one of the key ideas to get hold of very early on here is identifying what is the progress that isn't changing, or at least is changing much slower than the underlying technology. And the more that we can get hold of the idea of progress rather than being 100% focused on our products and technology, the safer our future can become. Because we're not suddenly wedded to the product that we are trying to optimize, perfect today entirely. We are also looking at what technologies are coming from the future. What is going to make this particular delivery mechanism out of date and irrelevant in the next 5-10 years, and what should we be working on now? So it creates this kind of agnostic feeling about the products that we have today, because we know something will change sooner or later. And the more that we can invest in great products today, but have one eye on the future, knowing that today will change, it creates a healthier balance in our organizations. So hold that thought, and I'm just going to build on it now with the second idea. And that's this idea of the innovation X-ray.